With infinite complaisance, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
And in fact, I may as well include this in the intro. Our second chat has just aired. So for Patreon members, of course, they get
awesome.
early access. And I did title it The Field of Screams. I just had to.
That was pretty good, I have to admit.
You just laid that one right out there. I was like, yeah, I have to use that.
Okay.
Yes. So that is out. So this is part 3. Part 1 was 510, The Boogeyman. Part 2, 517, The Field of Screams. And now this is part 3, which will include visits from the dead and premonitional dreams, essentially. Right, Barry?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and, like I tell everybody, I'm not sure how much of a setup you need to do. Maybe start with, of course, where this was, if we're still in the same place that we were for, Field of Screams and all of that. You're usually pretty good at setting things up, but wherever you believe that we need to start.
Yes, I'm going to talk about some psychic dreams and I've had strange dreams throughout my life. Some of them, are just dreams, but there's other cases where I know that it's more than that. And one of the things that I was reading about recently, and I've been studying this at the Rhine and throughout the years, human consciousness, and our modern science to this day does not really understand consciousness, and they have theories, but there's no one definitive answer for any of it. I've even read something about where they think that rather than the brain being the generator of consciousness, that it may be more of a sort of a receptor to that, a receiver, if you will. And so it's very interesting, And then when you get into dreams, we still don't understand why we dream. And again, there's theories, but there's no definitive answer. And I have some issues with the I understand the ideal of sleep paralysis, that you're in between these states, there's a conflict going on, but I can't help but wonder, how is it that everybody has a nightmarish experience and a lot of them are the same going through the centuries of succubus, demons, incubus, a hag. It's very interesting to me, and I can't help but think that, and I personally know that the dream state is an entrance way into the spirit realm, in my opinion, that we are susceptible, and sometimes that can be a good thing, and sometimes it could be a nightmare, literally.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I may, just to bring up really quickly that you've had some close to these kinds of things, like these ties with family members and premonitional things, such as what happened with your dad, right? I mean, that was
Yeah.
a very powerful experience, and everybody can hear that, of course, in 517. But this is what we're going to be talking about today, is not really the first time that you've had these kinds of ties with loved ones and essentially things that are premonitional.
Correct. Yeah. It's funny. I believe that when I was a little boy, and we got into that in the first episode I was on, I talked about some high strangeness stuff, and I do recall having strangers, if you will, visit, and whether they were in dreams or not. And I never knew who these people were, and I wondered in reflection with if some of them may have been ancestors or people. Since I was only a young child, I didn't know a lot of people who had died at that point in time, but maybe could have been people who had been my relatives that had passed away that, came to say hello. Maybe, I don't know. It just made me wonder about that. But the first time that I remember clearly having a visit was when my great grandfather paid me a visit, and he died when I was 13 years old, and I had a dream about him when I just around 20 or 21 years of age. I had been living in South Florida, going to art school, and my great grandfather was a master craftsman and artist. So he was a huge inspiration to me. And, you know, uh, it, I always revered this person, and he just was incredible at what he did. And so, to have him show up in my dream was very exciting. And what happened, I ended up in Florida because of my great grandparents, actually, because they became snowbirds probably back in their 1960s. They got a trailer down in a like a trailer park down there, which now the property would be way too expensive, and a lot of them have closed up and turned into expensive homes, $1 million homes or condos. But back then, they would have a lot of land, and they would set up trailers for retired people or snowbirds. And my great grandparents would go down in South Florida. And then my grandparents decided to continue with that tradition as well. And eventually, my mother packed her bags and moved to Florida. And thus, I followed my mom down there to finish my art schooling. And I've been down here in Florida ever since 1982. So, right around that time, after I had just moved to South Florida near Fort Lauderdale, a place called Dania, just south of um, Fort Lauderdale, I went to bed one night and I had this dream that all of a sudden my great grandfather was there. And it's funny, he was sitting in a lawn chair, but it was a lawn chair from the 1960s. It was aluminum framed lawn chair with the straps. And I remember that he would sit out in the chair like that when I was a little kid. They loved to get some sunshine up there in Western New York. When the weather got good, they would sit out there and enjoy the good weather out there. And my great grandfather was a really huge man. He's like a gentle giant. Considering that fine detail work, he worked in furniture factories, which my hometown was famous for at one going back to the 1800s. And a lot of Scandinavian craftsmen had moved into that area. And I am of Scandinavian descent, and my great grandfather Abert was a big, huge Swedish man with giant hands, and yet he carved these very intricate carvings. He carved a family portrait. So, anyways, in the dream, basically, I remember saying, Grandpa Aber, wow, what are you doing here? Kind of thing. And he just said, "Oh, I just wanted to give you encouragement and tell you to continue on with your schooling and follow your dreams, and don't let anybody stop you from doing what you want to doing the being an artist, and hone your skills." And he just gave me this great inspiration to get to continue on and follow my dream, basically. And of course, when I woke up, I was very excited about this. And I remember going to my mother and my grandparents and saying, "I just saw Grandpa Abert in a dream." And and they just all looked at me like, they didn't know how to respond, So, I'm sure that they're like, yeah, sure you did. But the interesting thing is, my great grandmother was still alive at that time, and she was still going down during the winters to their trailer. And my mother would ask me to go and run errands for her and pick up some groceries and things, you know. So there was a, connection to, even though I hadn't seen my great grandfather since I was probably about 12 or maybe 13. He had got cancer and passed away, and it may have been the first funeral I had ever been to, actually, but it just was really inspiring to me. And, I've always thought about that family lineage. My mother was an incredible artist, and she would do portraits of people and stuff. But, she was a teenager. My great grandfather was hoping she would go off to art school, but she ended up getting pregnant and having me, and then my sister, and then my other sister. We got married, and all that stuff, got married and then had me. But so any dreams that she had of becoming an artist went out the door with that. So basically, my mother kind of precariously, through me, pushed me to do my art, and then of course I got that inspiration from my great grandfather. So that was an exciting moment. And there's something about these dreams that they do not feel like, you have your typical dream. Sometimes you'll have something that's non-typical, and you'll remember them, but most of the time when I dream, they'll just be gone before I even really wake up, or shortly after I wake up. But these are very vivid. They're very short dreams. They don't they're not long drawn out dreams, and usually the dialogue is quite slight. But with my great grandfather, there was more dialogue there. But I believe that it's almost like a thought transfer, if you will, although it's in a dream state. But there's no mouths moving or anything. It's just seeing each other, and the conversation takes place in that little visual short period of time. When I wake up, which is almost immediately after I have them, I realize that I've had a dream visit, and I'm excited and emotionally, it really does something emotionally. It feels really great when something positive like that happens. And oftentimes I'll find myself in, even in tears of kind of a joy for that. So I've had several dream visits from family members who've crossed over. Not too long back, my aunt showed up, and she's been gone for several years now. And yeah, I remember dreaming that she just kind of came through a doorway, and all of a sudden there she was, and she looked young, and she looked really good, and I just almost like I remembered her from when I was a young child. And I just remember going, saying, wow, again, what are you doing here? You look great, kind of a thing. And she said, I just wanted to come and see you, more or less. And this is kind of very little conversation, other than just this feeling, and this visual opportunity to see one another. And then a hug oftentimes is brought into this. And I know these aren't scary stories, but this was it made me believe that our consciousness definitely continues on after death. I have not I am not a religious person per se, as in I don't follow. I don't, I know there's nothing personal to anybody here. It's all your own personal choice. I just decided that I believe that there is an afterlife. I do believe that there is evil out there, and is good. But I just don't get I just haven't tied myself to a specific religion. So I keep sort of a more spiritual take on things. But different family members who have, from different, who celebrate different religions, have come to me. So I don't know, how much of a difference that makes. It's kind of interesting, though.
You know what also is a common theme about dreams such as this is a lot of dreams. You wake up and you have a very foggy, vague barely their memory of what has gone on. But dreams, like you just mentioned, people seem to remember the entire thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing that's so interesting is, I wake up almost immediately after the dream, and I just realize like I'm realizing I'm during the dream, it's almost as if I'm a lucid type of a dream where I am having this conversation with the person. I am aware that they're there. I'm aware that I'm shouldn't be seeing them, and yet there they are, and I'm asking them questions. And yeah, when I wake up, I just feel like, wow, I just got visited. I have seen my nephew who had an untimely death. I have seen, like I say, my aunt. I've had actually a list of people from family, but like I say, most of the time they are a short dream, but it always feels really wonderful. And oftentimes there is a hug involved. So, anyways, I'm trying to look at my notes here, but for the most part, that is, you know, how these things go on. And I'm going to, from this point, talk about a dream visit from my father after his passing. And it's very personal things that I'm talking about here, but they're inspiring. And I know that your show deals with a lot of scary stuff, of course, and I've had my share of that, and I'll share plenty more of that as well. But and for the longest time, I thought of these things rather than a gift as more of a curse that, gosh, I got creepy things coming to me at night. I'm, being visited and terrified. And every time I turned around, there's some other thing going on. And, I've been educating myself through the years to try to understand things better and get a grip of it. But there's still things that, will terrify me. But in these cases, I also wanted to share the truly inspiring other side of that. And so for me, this stuff has a profound meaning and profound effect on my life because, I think about this stuff often. It reminds me that there are people looking out for me up there somewhere. And that's very inspiring for sure. So, yes, I'm going to call this William the Viking, and I'll explain why. So, back in 2015, my father, he had been diagnosed with lung cancer, and he had lived out of state. We lived away from one another. It was heartbreaking to get that news, and it was late stage. So he called me and told me he only had a certain amount of time to live, and I was have my family. I'm busy with my career and work. A very, the type of work that I did was quite demanding, and it was very hard for me to. I had a pretty good relationship with my father. I mean, we there was separation. He got remarried and had family up in a different state, and so we didn't get to see each other as much as we would have liked to. And then time just goes by, and you always think when you're younger that you have plenty of time, but you realize that people's keep aging, and you're aging as well. And, I had some guilt, during the time while my father, his health got worse, and I couldn't speak to him on the phone. And I went up there to visit a few times, but it was towards the end here that things really started to be stressful, and I was feeling terrible and wishing that I could do something about that. But anyways, it's the cycle of life. Here it is, and you're facing something like that. Well, my father was in the hospital, and oddly during this time at my workplace, I was dealing with some intense paranormal experiences, and I'll talk about that on another episode if I can. But that was having an impact on me as well. So I was experiencing, it just seemed like things were really ramping up with me as far as paranormal activity goes during this time. And a part of it may be my emotional state was helping to perpetuate that, maybe. But in any case, just prior to my father's passing, I had a couple terrible nightmares, actually. And of course, we can get. I mentioned sleep paralysis, and I'm not 100% sure if this was what that was, but I did have two really terrible, frightening nightmares just be prior to my dad's passing. And one of them um, was that I was in bed sleeping, and basically it was that some demonic being, entity, entered the room, and I'm laying in bed, seeing the room exactly as it is in reality. And this creature enters, and it's in the corner, staring at me and kind of just, really messing with my mind, I guess. And I'm, quite terrified, and I cannot wake myself up. And this thing was kind of just taunting me and enjoying it. And so apparently my wife must have heard me having a battle in my sleep, and eventually woke me up out of it. But it was very intense, very visual, scared the living daylights out of me. And I started doing a lot of prayers, and really was concerned about that because of what it was. And I know that, the psychological community would say it's just sleep paralysis and it's all your brain trying to figure out whatever. And maybe that is true, but it just left me with a very powerful, deep rooted terror that happened. And again, like I say, I was having to deal with some other issues in my workplace, which had been getting stranger as time was going on as well. So I didn't know what I was dealing with. And within a day of that, or maybe two, I had another horrific nightmare. And in this time, I found myself in a big open dark space, if you will. And there was, at a slight distance, there was this large, very elaborately carved chair with a high back, kind of a throne, I guess, if you will. And there was a woman sitting in it, and she was dressed in black. And I don't know, it's like she pulled me closer to her. And I realized that I had no ability to, couldn't control what I was doing. And I looked at her, and she was absolutely terrifying as well. But she was pretty much what you would say the old hag thing, except for she reminded me of like an Eastern European gypsy woman, all dressed in black, very old, very, very tense expression on her face. It's like psychically she was just messing with my mind. And somewhere in the midst of that, she picks up her hand and points it at me. And out of her fingers comes this black substance coming towards me. And I would call it black ectoplasm, if you will, because it looked like some thick substance almost rolling at me like smoke from a volcano or something. And then when it started hitting me, I could feel it hitting me. And I was, battling myself again in my sleep in this and I believe my wife woke me up again from that, and it was just so intense and so weird that I was like, "What in the heck is going on?" So I was doing a lot of praying, and of course, with my dad in the hospital on his deathbed, this concerned me too. I was like, "Oh, is this some kind of a what is going on here? Is there a battle for my father's soul going on at this time, or what is happening, or why am I having these experiences?" So after that happened, and I suffer from a lot of insomnia issues, which I've had sleep problems for years, and I still do. And could you blame me for really? you know,
No, I would say not, Barry, especially what we
uh,
have covered on prior episodes.
yeah. I mean, it's you go to bed and you don't know whether or not something's gonna be standing over there over you when you wake up. So I have had some sleep problems, and a lot of it was I. There were times where I had a tremendous amount of pressure put on me at work situations where I was in charge of big expensive projects with lots of people working under me and stuff. So stress probably had a lot to do with that in my adult life as well. But even now, I mean, I still have a lot of insomnia problems. So, any case, I decided to go out. Actually, I found out that my father passed away. Yes, and I was grieving, and my wife goes to bed a lot earlier than I do typically. So she was in bed, and I decided to lay down on the couch out in the living room that night. And I was just when I got that news that my father passed away in the hospital, and he was alone at night in the middle of the night, which really still to this day kind of haunts me that to know that's how he went. Because we all would like to think that we're going to be surrounded by all your loved ones, and the birds will be chirping outside and all that. It's not how it always works. So, but I was grieving, and I went to bed on the couch, and somewhere in the middle of the night, I had a dream visit of my father. And the way that for me, it looked like I was in the perspective of laying down on the couch, just as I would be in my living room. And my father was standing over me, looking down at me. And he never said anything, but he gave me a big smile. And it's more like a psychic telepathic transference of information. It just was he wanted to comfort me and let me know he's okay, kind of a thing. More or less, he gave me a nice beautiful nice warm smile, and I woke up after that. And when I did, I was like, oh my gosh, I just saw dad. And uh and then I thought about it, and I was like, wait, that's weird. My father was wearing a Viking helmet. What in the heck was going on? Why was my dad wearing a Viking helmet? And I sat there on the couch after I woke up thinking about that. And then it hit me. I'm like, oh, of course, dad would do something like that because dad was had a funny sense of humor. And we called him William the Viking, jokingly, because he was 6'2", a big, strong, burly guy, Scandinavian Swede, and he grew a very big, full beard quite often. And so I thought, of course, Dad would do something like that. He's trying to cheer me up. And I kind of put a smile on my face, and I kind of chuckled a little bit because he would jokingly say, I'll go to Valhalla, kind of a thing. And so I went and had to told I saw my dad and he was wearing a Viking helmet. He's like, what in the world, So it was a very odd thing, that he did. But right shortly after his passing, with the dark nightmares that I had, and then this vision of my father visiting me, I thought to myself, now my father lived up in he lived in South Carolina, and we was living down here in Florida, so this we didn't have any idea when the funeral would be or anything at that point in time, but I thought to myself that I wanted to see if I could find a psychic and get a reading done. And again, I'm leery about doing this because I know that there are people who are really good at just reading people, and they get your horoscope and then they get you to tell them a bunch of stuff about yourself, and they'll give you some generic stuff and that'll be it. And it costs you 75, $100 or whatever it is, So I started to just look for, I didn't know where to go with that. I was looking in the online, and then found a gentleman who was in Central Florida who claims that he outs false psychics. And, I was kind of interested in that. And I thought, oh, this guy, I'm going to go to him. I'm going to try it. So I made an appointment and I went to see him this was only within a couple days of my father's passing. And when I got there, he said, "Don't tell me anything." As soon as I got there, and he brought me into his house, brought me into this little room out in the back of his house, sat me down. He did not use tarot cards. He did not use any devices of any kind. He sat me down and he looked at me and goes, "Did your father just pass away?" And I was like, yeah." He goes, "Yeah, I feel his presence here." He's like, your dad, he goes, "This is going to sound really strange, but I see your father wearing a Viking helmet. Do you know what that means?"
Mm.
And I was in shock. You I was like, "What? Oh, you're kidding me." He goes, "It's not even a nice Viking helmet. It looks like a cheap plastic one or something." And he goes, What do you, what is that all about?" And I went, "Oh my gosh." I said, "You're blowing my mind." I said, "It's my father. He's got a funny sense of humor, and he's just trying to be joke with me a little bit to cheer me up because he knows I've been grieving his death." And I said, "I think that's why he did that." But I said, we jokingly called him William the Viking, and that was just part of our family thing. And when there was a toast, it would always be a skull, and we'd drink some glog during the holidays or whatever. And my father did like a nice pint of Guinness, is what he liked, which is Irish. But any case, yes, the psychic picked up on that, and he it was pretty shocking that he did. I couldn't believe that happened. And then he continued to tell me other things that were, there's no way this gentleman could have known anything about any of this. So he pinpointed where my father lived, that there were some of the other family members, kind of spoke about the family dynamics a bit. He also said things that really came out of my father's mouth. And, some of it could be, I guess somebody could guess this, but he was, goes, "Your father says he really likes your car," which he's said this to me a couple times. I don't know. He liked my old Chevy Malibu. So anyway, I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, he sure did like my car," kind of thing. But ultimately, he did not address the nightmares, which was kind of interesting. I don't, I tried to see what his thoughts were on that, but he just said, "I feel like you have people protecting you on the other side. I wouldn't worry about this too much," kind of a thing. And so, any case, that happened, and I thought that that was really interesting that this psychic picked up on that. And so after that happened, the gentleman actually told me that there was going to be some little bit of a interesting family misunderstanding type of thing when I got up there, and just to not let that get to me. And he was right. People, everybody was grieving. It was a difficult time, and so I went to my father's funeral, and after the funeral was over, now my father was a practicing Catholic, which I was not, and we always had our issues when it came to that because when I lived with him and I was as a teenager, he wanted me to follow in with his religion, and at that point, I was like, "No, I'm going to decide my own thing," So he would get mad and would want me to go to church with him on the weekends and stuff, and I just did not. I rebelled and did not want to be part of that. So, anyways, his funeral was at a Catholic church, and after that, we went back to my dad's and my stepmother's home. And somewhere along the line, my stepmom pulled out a big family photo album. And we were all standing over there looking at these photos and kind of going down memory lane. And somewhere in the back of this photo album, I flipped the page, and there was a photograph of my father wearing a cheap Viking helmet, and it's like staring at me. You may have the picture of that, by the way. And it just, it was like it shocked me. I had never seen this photograph ever. Think that they took that while they were on a vacation somewhere, and my father had been to. He's traveled a little bit here and there, even to Ireland and other areas, and I don't know if that photo was taken in Europe or if it was taken, it could have been taken at a theme park for all I know. But, I moved away when I was 18 years of age. And so, you know, th- he's did all kinds of other things that I was not involved with. So this photograph, I had never seen it before, but there it was, my dad wearing William the Viking, wearing his Viking helmet. That kind of was a bit of a mind blower. I took a photo of that picture and it's in my phone to this day. And anytime I think about my dad, I will pull that up and take a look at it. And I had one recently. I had a visit from my father. I was thinking about him one night when I was laying in bed, and I just started to mentally, I don't know, send him a message, I guess, if you will, and started talking to him a little bit. And then I went to bed. And when in my dream, I found myself walking into an empty diner. It kind of reminded me of a painting of from Edward Hopper. This was this lonely diner scene. And I looked around and there's one man sitting in the back in a booth. And as I glanced around, all of a sudden it dawned on me that was my father. I looked back and I looked and it was like, it's dad. And I just kind of ran over to him, and my father's sitting in this booth and he just stands up and he looks at me, and he just tells me he loves me and gives me a big hug, and that was it. But it was of all places, a diner. But it's interesting, my father is one of the things that he liked to do. And when I was a little kid, I remember traveling around, was he was a plumbing parts salesman at one point in time, going from little town to town, and he would stop at these little diners. And I have a thing where I love those old fashioned family owned diners myself. So, I thought, well, that sort of makes sense that he would be sitting in a diner. I don't know. It was not what I expected, but that's what that was. It was short, but I felt that it was again a little moment where he came through just to let me know that he was out there and that he loved me. So that's the story of William the Viking.
It's pretty wild and good on the psychic for being that kind that was like, don't say anything at all. Just let's go sit down and I will tell you what I am feeling and seeing and hearing, whatever the case might be. That's so good on him.
Yeah, sadly, I tried to. He told me he was putting up his house for sale and that he was going to be moving. And I've lost touch with him because I thought, man, you rarely find somebody that's that good. And I would have loved to have kept in touch and gone and gotten other readings from him. But when I tried to look him up, I could not find where he was at. And I, if I did have his card, I couldn't find it now. So, but it was, yeah, it was pretty amazing. I was really, that was shocking. I just was like, how in the world could this happen? But yeah, it was very interesting to say the least. So I'm going to move on to something that has this has been going on for a while, but it's still even up till just last week. I'm still getting information on, and it's kind of a bit of a mind blower. And I want to talk about a friend of mine who passed away. His name was John, and I have to describe John to everybody because John was not your just average normal guy, which a lot of my friends weren't at the time. And people say that about me too, but John was a extra special character. First of all, I met him in South Florida. And John, when he met me, I believe I was working at a costume store. uh, I had an 11-year work relationship with a costume store. They actually had a chain of stores, but this was a privately owned business. Interestingly, as my life is so full of synchronicities, the person who owned this costume store happened to be from up near my hometown area, which got me an instant shoe in for a job. But I didn't work there full time. I worked there part-time and seasonal because I was pursuing work in the film and television industry and so forth. So it gave me flexibility, which was great. But I would sell costume makeup, and I would do their internal. I would be their on-call artist and decorate the lobby and stuff like that. And anyways, John came in and we met, and he found out what I did, and he hired me to make a Klingon forehead piece for him because he's a big Star Trek fan. Now, John was a big, strong guy. Typically, would wear a mustache. He had a big head of curly hair. He was a very intelligent guy. And I guess some people would call him a nerd, except for he could kick your ass. This guy was a fighter. He was a Chinese boxing instructor and Tai Chi instructor. He was a pretty badass guy. So, anyways, we got along really well, and he ended up becoming the best man at my little humble wedding. My wife and I had our little humble wedding, and he showed up. He drove a vintage hearse to my wedding,
Yes.
with a casket and a skeleton in it, and a glowing skull on the dashboard with the red lights, which I had ridden in before. And the look on people's faces when they drove past us was quite interesting. So yeah, John was a character, to say the least. you know, After we got married, after Hurricane Andrew hit, which is the same year I got married, um, about a year later, my wife and I decided we wanted to leave South Florida. We decided to try our luck in Central Florida. And the reason that I was interested in this, I was frightened to move for one thing because I had established a lot of good work connections and things, but we were kind of spinning our wheels. We couldn't seem to get move ahead. The cost of housing and everything in South Florida was very high. We needed a I needed a job with benefits. We were trying to give our own health insurance and stuff. We were struggling a bit. So we decided to make a move. And interestingly, I dropped my wife off one day at the salon. I think we had one of our cars just broke down or something. I was coming back from the salon and I see a sign out on the road, psychic fair. And I make a U-turn and gave my last 20 bucks to this lady in this little fair. And as soon as I walked in, I said something to her and she goes, "You just read my mind." And I was like, "What?" And she goes, "Oh, you have abilities." And we connected really good. And she just looked at me and goes, "Oh my God, are you thinking about moving?" I went, yeah. And she says, "You need to go. Pack your shit and go." And so she's like, I feel so frustrated right now looking at you." She goes, "Oh my God, you have an opportunity waiting for you that's going to be amazing. You got to go. You got to make this move." And because I had been hesitating, and my wife's the one would go, "Why are you so hesitating about making this move?" So this woman, she's like, "I just see an incredible opportunity for you." And she actually said, you're going to go into a tall glass building, and two men are going to be standing at the doorway waiting to meet you, and they're going to hire you, and you are going to have a long amazing career from that job. So that gave me a little hope, and so we ended up making this trip. And by the way, I ended up going into this big glass building, and when I got to the door, there were two statues on both sides of figures standing there to greet me into the place. And I ended up with a 17 years worth of a career working for that company. So amazingly, it all worked out. But I'm getting off track here. So let me get back to my friend John. Well, as we moved away, I only got a chance to see John. He was a good friend. Did a lot of things together in South Florida. I knew him for about almost 10 years or something down there. And but life, when out of sight, out of mind, you live your life. I got up here, started a career, and we're doing our thing. I kept in touch with him, and I saw him a couple times here and there, but we didn't have the whole we didn't have social media and all this stuff and cell phones and things at the time that we moved away. Eventually that stuff happened, but I was slow into getting into all that stuff. And so we didn't keep in touch all that often. Unfortunately, there were some years that went by before we would communicate with each other. And eventually, we both got onto Facebook with one another, but I didn't do that stuff a lot, and he didn't either. So we would send a message once in a while. And 2011 was the last time that I had heard from him, and he sent me a message. And he let me know that he had cancer, but I did not know that he had a long battle with it, which ended up being a 13-year battle with cancer. And he never told me that. And so when he did say he had was sick, I didn't realize it was an advanced stage at that point in time. And, it's kind of a weird thing. Sometimes you just don't know what to say, when you hear these things other than, "I'm really sorry to hear that. I
Yeah.
wishing you the best," kind of a thing. And then that was the last time I think I replied to him, but I don't think I heard anything after that. And that would have been like June or July of 2011. Well, somewhere after, right thereafter that, well, it was actually in October, sometime in October in 2011, I had a dream about John, and John just showed up in my dream, and we were in a very unusual surroundings. It looked like we were standing inside the ruins of an old castle. Everything there was all old stone, ancient stones, structure of some kind, but it was dilapidated, and it was kind of an odd place to meet him. But and I was, I didn't really know what was going on there, but I was like, What are you doing, John? What are you doing here?" And he just said, "I wanted to see you. Wanted to come and see. I wanted to see you." I don't know, exactly, but again, it's a telepathic message. Not I don't think I'm seeing mouths move or anything like that. And he was wearing something that looked like from a medieval time period, if you will. Nothing elaborate or fancy here, just like some kind of a Lucy kind of a shirt with a drawstring neck, front, like V cut with a lace front. And, something else about John, he was really big into the Renaissance fairs and did sword fighting and stuff. And he had elaborate costumes and things that he would do. So he was quite a boisterous character and would get involved in a lot of these things. And so I just thought that was interesting. And then after he gave me a big old bear hug, and then that was the end of that dream. And when I woke up, I thought, wow, had a dream about John. I wonder what that was all about. And then I thought somewhere along the line, I went onto his Facebook page and discovered that he had passed away. At that point, I saw his mother post something on there, and I had heard about his mother. And John always had he loved animals, and he always had interesting pets. He had a pet skunk, he had a big, huge pet iguana, a bearded dragon. I mean, it was somewhere along the line, he ended with a pet rooster. I don't know, but he got that from his mother, who his parents lived on a farm property in northern Florida, and so I sent a message to his mother with my condolences and introduced myself to her. I had never met her because she lived far away from South Florida. He had gone to college down there and stayed there. But so she communicated back with me, and I told her that he was my best man at my wedding and so forth. And, it was a nice connection. I chose to not tell her that I had a dream about him because I thought about it, but I thought that's kind of a weird thing to tell somebody, that you don't know. Go, oh, by the way, I saw him in a dream. I didn't know. I wrestled with that a little bit, but any case, as time went on, I, I just it was sad, but I kept in touch with his mom a little bit. She's like 90 years old, and lovely lady, she's lives alone at this point, and he was her only child. So, it was sad, that she lost her husband and her only son, all within this 2 year time period or something. So,
Mm.
and I just decided to keep in touch with her, and I would send her a message once in a while, and that would be about it. But time went past, and somewhere along the line, I think I ended up having another dream with John. Came to visit me again, and that was interesting. I think it was in 2019. I find myself in this huge, huge room, and I see two people standing there, and I realize that it was my friend John, and he's with a woman. And this room has a really high ceiling, and it's like an arched ceiling, and it looks like a medieval church or something. It was really weird. I thought, wow, am I in heaven or something? Where I remember looking around uh, at the time, kind of like, wow, where is this place? And I was like, John, what are you doing? Oh my gosh, so good to me. So good to see you, kind of thing. And he's like, I wanted to introduce you to, sadly, I can't remember a name, but there was this woman, and I went to give her, it was like an awkward hug because I didn't know her. It was like kind of a little hesitation, and then I hugged her, and it was again very short. These are very short little dreams. It makes me feel like maybe they can only come through for a really little brief moment that they're allowed to do this, whether it's an energy thing or a rule, that you can only come back for a certain amount of time, or maybe a rule that I'm only allowed to get a glimpse of this or whatever it is. But um, anyways, I remembered that when I woke up and I thought about this. Well, he gave me a big hug too, and I just was like, "Oh my God, it's so good to see you," kind of a thing. And when I woke up, I was thinking about that, and I thought, "Wow, what?" I saw John again. I was like, "And who was that woman? And where were they?" And And I thought they were dressed in these amazing, elaborate clothing, and I just was very uh, amazed by the whole thing. But I decided at that point that I was going to share that with his mother. I thought, you know what? I think I need to share this with his mom. Maybe that's why he's coming back, coming through. Maybe I'm supposed to share this. And, since that, I've contacted other family when I have had dream visits that pertain to them. I will say, "Hey, I saw so and so, and just wanted you to know that they're doing good or whatever." Give them a little comfort, kind of a message. So I sent John's mother a text message, and I never heard back from her. And then I thought, oh, maybe I upset her or something. My I started worrying about that. I'm like, well, some people might find this because I've actually told a coworker one time that, oh, I had a dream visit from a family member. I was excited, and they looked at me and went, "That's from the devil. You're being deceived by the devil." I was like, oh, geez. I don't think and there was nothing negative here about this, but so people have different ways of viewing this kind of thing. I was the last time I told that person anything, but so it's been insulted a little. Like, whoa, that's a harsh assessment of something you don't even know about. But, anyways, people have their different beliefs, so that's that. But time went on, and almost a year later, I don't know. I just decided to pick up the phone and call. I try to get my dates straight here. Somewhere, I guess I called her up and found out that her computer had broken, but she ended up getting it fixed. And then after I had a conversation with her, she ended up seeing my messages. But I on the phone I said, "Well, I sent you a message and I told you that I had a dream and I saw your son." And he was with a woman, and she goes, "Oh yeah, well, I've seen him in my dreams too. He's in Scotland," she says. I'm like, "Huh? He's in Scotland? What does that mean?" And she says, "Oh, well, in my dream I saw him in he was in glass he was in Edinburgh." And I'm like, "Oh." And she goes, he was walking. I saw him. He was in a crowd of people, and that he went through some tall buildings through an alleyway, and I was following him around, and he ended up in this garden, and he sat down on a stone wall in front of a fountain and a pond. And I came up behind him, and he turned around and he looked at me and said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "Oh, I just wanted to see you, son." And kind of so she acted like it was just a matter of fact, like, "Oh yeah, I've seen him and he's in Scotland." Well, I didn't really understand what that was all about, but and then she goes, "Oh yeah, and you probably saw," and she mentioned the woman's name. And you know what? The funny thing is, John had gotten married, but and I only knew a little bit about that, but I never got a chance to meet his wife or anything. When she mentioned this person, I thought, oh, that's weird. Why would she think that or something? I didn't understand what she's talking about. But some more time went by, and we ended up. I found out that John in 2009 took a dream vacation with his wife to Edinburgh. And it was between he had had all this battle of with the cancer going on, and he had been in some kind of a little bit of a remission, or he had gotten through a big surgery, and they planned out this vacation. And what happened was, at that particular time, there was this really big 100 year celebration of family clans gathering together, Scottish clans gathering together in Edinburgh for this big event. And he planned it out because apparently he just he was playing this character in his Renaissance festivals of a Scottish warrior, and ended up doing some family history search and finding out that he actually was part of a clan, the MacLean clan from Scotland. And so he ends up going there for this big celebration. He spent 7 days in Edinburgh, and outside the window of their where they were staying in the hotel was a cathedral. St. Giles Cathedral is right outside the window. So that was interesting. Then they spent the rest of the time at a place called the Isle of Mull, I think is what it was. So I didn't, I found out all this information actually because only in 2023 did Peggy sent me a package in the mail with all this information in it. But when she told me that she had a dream about him and he was in Scotland, I thought to myself, well, that's interesting. I wonder if there's some kind of a big church or cathedral with a high ceiling. And I ended up going online and looking up a cathedral in Edinburgh. And sure enough, the St. Giles Cathedral came up and I saw interior images of it. And I went, oh my God, that is where I saw John and that woman at, that was a kind of a shock to me that this looks exactly like how I saw this in my dream. So I found that was very interesting.
Yeah, that's insane that you didn't even have to go there yourself. He took you there and you saw the inside of it without ever actually setting foot in the place.
Exactly. I didn't know, first time I see him, we're in some old ruins of a castle or something. And the second time I see him, we're inside this giant cathedral and I'm confused. I have no idea. I didn't know anything about his trip to Scotland, no, nothing about any of this stuff. And so this was really starting to get quite interesting to say the least, I mean, kind of very interesting. And I shared that with his mother. And then she tells me, yes, I've had dreams about him as well. What's really interesting is I just spoke to his mother just last weekend, and she told me about her dream again. And I asked her more specific questions. I said, can you tell me about the actually setting that you had where you saw him? And she described, yes, he was sitting on probably a 2 to 2.5 foot stone circular wall that went around a pond with a fountain in a garden, right? So I just went online and I typed in, and my God, I swear, I there is a botanical garden in that area, the Royal Botanical Garden of Edinburgh, and I swear I found her exact description online from this. Now I haven't had a chance to verify that with her yet because she said her computer was giving her trouble again. But I just saw that that was amazing that there is actually a place like that in Edinburgh. I didn't know anything about that. I've never been there, so that was a big surprise.
Yeah, that is very cool.
And so another thing happens in 2023. I was at work. I was before I retired. I'm just busy doing my work day, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I thought about John and his mother, and I thought, oh, I don't know why. It just came on my in my head out of nowhere. I'm just busy doing my tasks at work, and suddenly I started thinking about them. And I had been a while since I had communicated with his mom, and I thought, I should I need to contact her. I wonder if she's okay or whatever. So I was thinking about it, but it was like a Thursday that I thought about this. I'm at work, I'm busy. I got a family and stuff going on. And I thought, well, I'll call her on Saturday. Basically, that's what I did. I called, actually, I think I sent her a text message again, but I didn't hear back from her. And So I called her on Saturday and she says, "Oh, your timing is interesting that you called me." And I was like, "Well, why is that?" And she says, "Well, on Thursday, such and so drove up from South Florida and delivered John's ashes to me." And I was like, you know, what? What? She goes, I said, when? She goes, On Thursday, they drove up and they stayed overnight and they brought his ashes to me. And she told me she said that John's wife's mother brought the ashes, and another person that I actually knew from that was a coworker and dear friend for many years. And I was just like, wow, okay, I was like, that is interesting. And she goes, oh yeah, I was glad to get his ashes, but I still was like, well, I wonder why his wife didn't deliver those ashes. Well, I've discovered afterwards that his wife passed away the same year that I dreamt that he introduced me to this woman in Scotland. She had passed away from an illness too, and he wanted to introduce me to her.
And is that the woman that is in the picture with him? The pictures that
Yes.
you sent? Okay.
Yeah.
And by the way, just for
Yes.
anyone that asks, no, I will not be sharing any of the photos.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Those.
yeah, I wanted to ask
Those
if
are.
that was the same woman.
Yes. Yeah. Those are kind of personal, but I have to also mention that I found out that the first dream that I had was we're in the castle, that actually John, when they were in Scotland on their vacation, that he joined the McLean family, the clan I should say, uh to Mull Castle, Moy Castle on Mull, the Isle of Mull. It was Moy Castle, was his ancestral castle. And I pulled up images of that. Well, some of that was in the package that his mom sent me. She sent me a big package with all kinds of stuff, and also those newspaper clippings where you see him in that.
Mm-hmm.
You can see he's quite a character. He's in his fine costume with his
His
100-year-old
kilt.
Scotch.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a 100-year-old Scotch he's drinking right there. So I look at this castle and I'm like, oh my God, that's where we met the first time that we met. We were in this ruins of this Moy Castle. It's unbelievable. But there it is. I mean, I just, it blows my mind to know that he came through so powerfully and yeah, brought me over there to see him, I guess.
Yeah, definitely a lot of tie-ins there.
Yeah, I mean, so that whole thing just kept going on, and even up till just recently, I've been, discovering. It was like it unfolded. I was getting pieces of a puzzle, but I didn't understand it until it all came together, and then I went, "Oh my gosh!" So I think he and his wife are still roaming around in the hills of the Bonny Hills of Scotland, on a permanent vacation, I guess, if you will, and being where his ancestral heritage is. And she was totally into the whole Renaissance thing and all that as well. So, you know, who knows? But that is that story, and I'm sticking to it. It really happened to, as far as I'm concerned, it did. But some people go, "Oh, it's just a dream, wishful thinking, or whatever." But it's more than that. There's no question in my mind about that. Now, I think I'm looking. Have to make sure I didn't forget or skip over things here. Looking at my little bullet points that I gave you. Let's see. We did that. Yeah. So the next thing that I'm going to get to is something that happened to me when I was back in 1984. I was 23 years old and living in South Florida, and this dream has haunted me for forever, since it happened. Really, that Yeah, I was living in South Florida. I was actually living with my mother while I was going to school. I was getting on her nerves, I'm sure. So she booted me out of there sometime soon after. I don't blame her, but I ended up with some fellow art students. My kid brother moved down, and we lived in a house after that. But at the time, I was living in an apartment with my mom. It was October 1984. Now, I had just gotten finished my schooling actually, and just was getting my career started, and some exciting things were going on for me. And I got involved in, I was getting involved in some television things and so forth, and I had a variety of different artistic projects that I was getting involved with and so forth. So, I was excited about the future and what was going on at that time, and living pretty good for a guy who's just getting started. I ended up going to bed one night and I had a really intense dream, and it was just so heavy. It was just such a heavy dream. And the dream was that I dreamt that there's somebody that was an acquaintance of mine. They were not a friend, not a family member. That was the weirdest part about this. It was someone that I had gone to school with in grade school, junior high school. Well, 1 year in junior high school, then my parents got divorced and I had to move away. And I ended up returning back to town for high school. So we had gone to school together, but we never were friends. We didn't hang out. This guy was kind of everything that I wish that would have been if I could have. But I mean, he was athletic. He was good looking, athletic guy that was popular. So I wasn't, well, I certainly wasn't a good athlete, and I wasn't popular, wasn't terrible. I mean, just, we just ran with different crowds, and he had his crowd that he hung out with, and I hung out with the misfits. But anyways, later on in high school, but as a kid, he was decent, a decent kid. He wasn't a jerky or anything. He never gave me a hard time, although he may have hit me with a dodgeball a few times. But anyways, I thought it was kind of very strange that I had this dream about him. But we had one time connected, and that was after my senior year in high school. I was getting ready to go away. I think I mentioned maybe in the last episode that my art teacher inspired me to go to art school, and thank goodness for that because I had no plans in my life at all. So I was having a go away party for myself before I left town, and my parents, my father, my stepmother, allowed me to have some kids show up at our family property. I don't think they realized how many kids were going to end up showing up. Neither did I. But anyways, this guy showed up there because word of mouth gets around apparently when you're in high school. So, and he said, "Oh, I hope you don't mind that I came." I went, "Oh my gosh, no, it's great. I'm glad to see you. Make yourself at home. Here, have a beer." The drinking age was 18 back then, so I think we were legally able to do that. Anyways, and he wanted to talk to me in the middle of this party I was having. He wanted to have a one-on-one conversation with me, which was interesting. And I said, "Oh, all right." We went off to the side a little bit, and we're just outside talking a bit. And he apologized to me for not making more of an effort to be a friend or something. And I thought, "Oh, that's just, don't be silly." I said, "Don't worry about it. We're fine." I was like, "Same thing for me." I mean, I said, "We just ran in our own circles. We lived in different neighborhoods. No, don't worry about it. Just enjoy yourself." And we talked a little bit about the future, whatever. And he was like the star athlete, and so I just assumed he was going to go off to college or whatever. I don't know. I did, we didn't get into any too much of that, but we had a little bit of a bonding moment, and had a toast, and that was kind of it. And I said, well, I better get back to hosting this gathering before people tear our property up or something, make sure everybody's behaving. And that was it. And I never talked to him or saw him again. So 5 years later, I had this dream about him, and he is crying to me, and he's telling me all of his problems in this dream. He just weeping, and he is distraught. When I woke up from it, I was just highly disturbed, and I thought, oh my God, why would I dream about him? That's so weird, I didn't know where he lived. I didn't know, I haven't been in touch with him at all or anything. And I tried to go off and head off and do whatever I was doing at that time during the day. And during that day, I kept thinking about it, and I thought, I just couldn't shake that feeling that there was something really strange about this dream. And so later that evening, when I was heading back home, I was driving down, I think I-95 past the Fort Lauderdale airport. And I look over and see the jet sitting there. And I just had this urgent feeling like I needed to get in touch with him for some reason. It's like, I have to contact him somehow. I don't know how to, I don't have any way to reach him at this time. This is 1984. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have the cell phones or anything. I didn't know what to do. So that when I got home later on, I called my sister who lived in my hometown still. And she goes, "What are you doing calling me? Middle of the week, work day or whatever." And I say, "Hey, do you remember so and so?" And she's like, "Yeah, why?" And I'm like, "Oh, I was like, I was just wondering, what's going on with him or something." And she said, "Oh, from what I understand, he's got married, he's got a kid, and he's doing fine. He has a home and so forth." I was like, "Oh, all right." She goes, "Well, why are you asking about that?" And I was like, "Oh, never mind." And she's like, "You're weird." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. All right, talk to you later." And we hung the phone up. The following day, she called me and told me that he had committed suicide. I was devastated, because I thought, oh my gosh, I was supposed to do something to stop this. Why else would that I have been given this vision? Why else would this have happened? It's just really bothered me terribly, and it has for years actually. That because my grandmother had amazing abilities. I'm sure there was times when she would see a warning or something and try to warn people, but I know for a fact there was times when people did not heed her warnings, and they end up costing them their lives because she told me. But in my case, I didn't know that I didn't trust these things as a bill. I didn't know what it was going on, why I would have dreamt about that person, but somehow I ended up having this ESP, telepathic. And I don't. It wasn't seeing into the future. It was like seeing then and now at that moment what was going on in his head. So it was more of an ESP kind of a type of thing, or clairvoyant, I guess. Vision is what I got in my dream. So I was really, really torn up about that, just felt terrible after finding that out. And, like I say, I had a lot of guilt. Well, years go by. I never forgot about it. But in July of 2023, I was planning to go back home. Somehow I reconnected with some other people from my school days. I was never a big like rah 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 school. I love school. I was not me. I was more like, school sucks. I don't really care about it. I mean, I wasn't part of the glee team or anything. I was a rebellious artist guy that liked rock and roll. So most of my friends were similar, and so, I never went to do any of those reunions or anything until 2019. I had to go up to see my mother I figured, well, they're gonna have it. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll go, maybe I won't. I don't know. And I ended up going, even though I was terribly uncomfortable. But I went and met with some people in a bar afterwards and reconnected with a couple people. And so in 2023, I was communicating with one of these people from school through text message, and I said, "Oh, I'm heading back home, and at this time." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, so am I. I'm going to be there the same week. Wow, what a coincidence!" And I was like, "Yeah, it is pretty amazing." Well, I was like, "Hey, let's meet up and have lunch." Okay, we're going to do that. And then for whatever reason, out of my mouth, I don't, or well, I'm on my text, I just decided to say, I'm going to be going to the cemetery to visit so and so's grave. And all of a sudden, he was like, um, I want to go. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't even know why I even said it. And then he said, you know that we were best friends for years, right? Which I had no idea. I did not know anything about that. And I was like, uh, no, I didn't. He goes, we grew up together, and we were best friends for throughout our entire childhood. And at that point, I was like, "Wow, that is beyond a coincidence here." I think maybe what was that all about? But when we had met for lunch, when we got back, I got back up there as we were. I ended up telling him about my dream and that I've been haunted by this through the years. We ended up going and we paid our respects, and both of it. He'd been haunted by this event for years too, which is interesting. So we paid our respects and said some prayers, and that was kind of just try to close that chapter. We had some conversations about that whole incident, but and I did get some a little bit of insight as to some of what was going on. But it was just such a tragedy. And I just would like to, since I'm talking about this, please, if anybody is having problems or thinking of anything and needs help, please dial 988 suicide crisis hotline for help. I mean, because I just wish that I could have prevented this. And you know, that's what happened.
I mean, Barry, I hope you're not still carrying a whole lot of guilt from that, because I'm sure that you do realize that I mean, we don't know for sure, but there's probably only so much that you could have done. And hopefully you and his other friend, got some closure.
That's the thing. I think that this really did help to get that closure, which was needed because it really has I had felt guilt for a long time. I feel much better about that. And I'm just happy that we went there and that by amazing, again, this is synchronicity. I'm going to say that I happen to have a communication with that particular person, which I didn't have very often, and just happened to be going home at the exact same time. He lived in another state, and I live in another state. We just happened to be going the same exact week. And then I, for whatever reason, shared that with him and find out that he was best friends. And so we had that closure. We went and found where he was at, and we talked to him, and we had some prayer, and we closed that chapter out. And I think that yeah, it helped. It really did. And that kind of sums up my stories for as far as my some of my dreams. It's not all of them, I don't think, but these are some of the things that stuck out to me more than others, and I wanted to share them.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming back on. So that, guys, that is part 3, and then part 4, which is actually titled "The House of Ivy," is something that you have titled this next section for
Oh
part
boy.
4.
Oh boy.
I'm looking
Get ready
forward
for
to
that.
that. Yeah. And that's looks like still in Florida, so more Florida stories, which everyone loves Florida stories because, well, Florida.
Yeah, well, then that's going to be an intense one for sure. But I, really appreciate you letting me come on and sharing this stuff. And for me, the thing about this psychological community could say it's all in my head, or I just had a dream, or whatever you want to say. Or I mentioned to you, I think in a text that they have a syndrome, haunted person syndrome. Some of the psychological. It's not official, apparently. I looked that up again, but I read an article where they believe that people who have multiple paranormal experiences suffer or have what they call the haunted person syndrome, and basically, it comes down to where they believe you're delusional, but they're sympathetic and will try to help you in any way they can with your problems,
Poor you, Barry,
But
right? You weirdo.
yeah, well, I know that a lot of other people have been on your show must have the same
We
syndrome.
all
So,
do, my
you
friend.
know,
We all do,
and
apparently.
I look at these things. Fortunately, despite all my crazy experiences, I still keep a sense of humor, and I have to laugh about it, or I might cry sometimes. But I feel blessed now, that I've been given these glimpses, these little opportunities to see things that I feel bad for other people. I was like, wow, I mean, what a gift it is to be able to see somebody. I wish I could pick out and call them on a phone, like a calling them on a phone or something. Hey, I'd like to talk to you, Grandma, but it's not how it happens. It just kind of happens spontaneously or something. But it's good to see the people that come through.
And they come through when they're supposed to. That's obvious by
Yeah,
these
yeah,
synchronicities, as we like to call them, right? Well, thanks so
yeah.
much, Barry. I really appreciate you. I'm looking forward to next time, and I encourage everybody to go listen to the latest one. Prior to this was 517, and Barry's very first edition, 510. Thanks again, Barry.
Thank you. Take care.